inspired. You have chosen to watch this show with us, whether it's live right now, Tuesday, 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, or later on because you decide to watch it on Saturday or on Sunday. Regardless of when you're watching it, we're glad that you're watching it because you're watching the greatest collection of human beings ever assembled in the history of mankind. I am. Here's why. Because of my 9 friends. Not because of me. It's because of the 9 friends I get to show with. Gentlemen, say hello to the people. It's so good to see your faces.
You don't know what it is?
Before we get into the rundown, alright, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to ask that question that you asked right before Adam asked him who were alive, and then Adam exists. Right before that, before Adam rolled his eyes and like this. Right before that, I need you to ask that question you asked him right before.
It's not complicated. Who is the better, who had the more hits, who provided more entertainment? Is it Wu-Tang Clan or the Fugees?
Well, those are very vast categories that cancel the Fugees.
Okay. No, now, all I gotta ask is this. Are you asking this because of the Haitian Massive? Are you asking this straight out of the part of music?
I saw it on TikTok. It was somebody who was saying, one of those things they say, say an unpopular opinion that you believe to your core. And this lady, she's like, the Fugees were better than Wu-Tang. I think about how many singles they had, the hits, and how the Wu-Tang Clan is a little bit overrated. So, it got me thinking, who is actually better? Is it the Wu-Tang Clan as a group, or is it the Fugees?
Actually stay on TikTok, right?
I'm not ashamed about it. It's great fun on TikTok. Y'all stay on Instagram with all the ads, all the Kardashians, and whoever else. I'm over here having fun.
Okay, so let me ask you this question, Bart. When this question came up, are they comparing hits like, are they comparing hits like, Lauryn Hill's hits, and then White Club's hits, and then one song by Prize, Get a Superstar, or are they comparing just the hits of the Fugees?
They were talking about individually, collectively together. So individually, like Recommend Redman, I know Redman's not really, but then individually also Lauryn Hill and White Club, all that kind of stuff. Who did more for the culture? Who was better? Who had more hits? So they were talking about those 2 groups of people who were better.
Why do you have to figure out who's better, man? I'm just kidding.
Yo, don't do that. Okay, so apparently right now we're hearing it from you in the chat. We're getting text messages from friends on the streets that our audio collectively isn't the greatest. So we're going to do something that we've never done before. We're going to do a live sound check to find out whether or not it's all of us or whether it's one of us. Because right now,
I think it's all of us right now. They're saying
Is it OBS?
it might be OBS.
Yeah, try OBS.
Says I can't.
Everyone says it sounds great. You said Hannah's preaching, whoever Hannah is.
Hannah's one of the homies.
Alright.
So we get that fixed up for you, or what do you want to do?
As I said, audio sounds like 60%.
I missed that.
They said that the audio sounds like 60% of churches the first day they went online.
Y'all streaming via Calvin's internet.
The audio sounds like a 1930s broadcast. I just heard something that's bad.
Me too. Hashtag stop the stream. Yeah. It be like that sometimes. It be like that. Shut off and start again tonight. Wow, Daryl. Alright. It do be like that, eh?
So how we sounding now, boys? We sounding better now?
I might have to just start making it over again.
Nah, it's not good at all. Let's turn these streams off and come back.
Alright, so those who are watching, we're going to shut off.
This meeting is being
After
recorded.
what you said,
Or
Daddy, what I pray?
it's because you're out here speaking the Lord's anointed. Yeah.
Did you just really
Yo,
say that?
No.
Yo, I said what I said.
Yeah, say what you said. Don't worry about that.
Listen, God uses all of us, unblemished or blemished. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So we just gotta
Yeah,
be
of
careful.
course.
Show
Think about
tonight in Jesus'
Of
name.
course.
Jason,
don't kill
me. Stop that show tonight in Jesus' name.
I got you, bro.
Yo, we're live right now, guys. Guys, we're live.
Yo, we're live. We're live.
Yeah,
We're back.
All right, welcome back to
Yo,
the
what
House
up,
of
House of
Common
Common?
show.
Yeah.
Chase is
What's
out
good,
here
man?
talking to the massive on Instagram.
All right, are we?
There
we're
we
back
go.
on.
Thank
We're back
you.
live.
Thank you for.
We're
Thank you for
live right now.
We live, yo.
We're live
We
right now.
live.
Hey, 19 viewers or more. We're back. Oh, it's crazy. Are we? How we sounding out there? How we sounding out there? We sounding better now? We're down to 16.
Chase is out here talking to the massive on Instagram. All right, are we? There we back on. We're back live. Thank you for.
Wow, I can actually hear myself.
We're live right now. Hey,
Yo,
19
somebody has
viewers
to
or
mute
more. We're back.
their phone.
Somebody mute your phone. Somebody mute
Who's on
however you're
YouTube?
watching
Whoever's-
YouTube tonight, right now on our show. Can you please mute yourself so that we don't hear ourselves.
And they said the sound sounds dope right now.
This sounds like we're doing a live show for the very first time, and we've been doing these for months now. You can tell that we're ready for a summer break when everything is falling apart on a random night in June. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the second House of Common show on this June 22nd, 2021. We are so glad that you're rocking with us. You have decided to hang out with the greatest collection of human beings this side of Yonge Street, or depending on what side of Yonge Street you are on. Depending on which side of Yonge Street you're on, we are the greatest amount of people on the planet that you can be hanging out with on a Tuesday night.
What
You
if
can
you're in the
also follow
middle?
us beyond this on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify on podcasts, or check out some of our archived videos from season 1 or some of the conversations that we've been having in season 2 on YouTube right here. Search the words House of Common show. Subscribe, all of that good stuff. Gentlemen, it is so great to see you. We've been hanging out for the last hour and change, talking about summer plans, making fun of each other, doing what we normally do. Really quickly, we were having a conversation about whether or not the Fugees are better than the Wu-Tang Clan. Bart, I'm going to say Wu-Tang Clan because no matter what Fugees have done, and listen, Fuji Law was great, Ready or Not was great, How Many Mics was great. They've never done for Wu-Tang Forever. They've never done Triumph. Triumph is one of the greatest songs of all time.
True.
And so I respect the agency. I respect the agency on the Fugees. And plus, the Fugees really only had one great album. The score is fantastic. Blunted on Reality had Nappy Heads, the remix, and Vocab, the remix. That's pretty well it. And then the score. And then Wyclef scored, and he ruined the entire gamut for everybody else. Hi-oh! Speaking of messiness, gentlemen, let's go to the rundown right quick. Things that have happened this week that you want to chat about. And friends of ours of the show, if you're in the chat right now on YouTube, what are some things we want you to help us tonight with the rundown? What are some things that have happened this week that you're like, this is a really crazy thing that has happened this
We gotta
week?
go. We gotta go to the one that's gonna blow up. I don't even think.
Everyone's career is
I think we gotta go to that one we were gonna talk about, but Bart was saving his response for the show.
Or what pray tell is that, Stefan?
Well, earlier today, well, not today. Today is not the first time, but throughout the last few weeks, Toronto police have been moving homeless people who have set up tents in
People
different parts.
experiencing homelessness. So,
Shut up, Calvin.
No, actually,
It's
No,
not-
people
yeah,
experiencing
put-
homelessness.
Okay, guys.
Put some respect
Okay,
on them.
all right. Listen, people have set up tents in different parts in the city of Toronto who are presently experiencing homelessness. And Toronto police have been going around at the order of John Tory, the mayor, and asking them to leave, evicting them, tearing down structures that have been built. And people, citizens, good citizens of Toronto have been banding together and repelling the police, repelling private security. And so you know, it has caused a lot of uproar amongst the community in the city of Toronto.
So, gentlemen, I mean, obviously, that's a really difficult thing to hear and to watch happen. What are some thoughts on that, boys? Like, is that the right thing? Is that the wrong thing? Is there a better way that you can suggest? What are some thoughts?
I can go. At least I so get my thoughts out there, and then we can have more discussion around it as well. I think it's 100% wrong. Number one, there was no notice, um, and you're treating people like strays, and they're humans. Number two, I'm trying to go fast. I can elaborate on all of this, but I want to try to go fast. Number two, the police service board spends over $1 billion to fund the police and all of its efforts in the city of Toronto. There's more than enough money for us to have spent a little bit of that for some temporary housing and to help the homelessness issue that's happening in the city. Number three, the way they did it, it's exactly why they got the response they did from the community. They showed up like SWAT, as if they're like, oh yeah, these people are tough and rough people who are going to give us a lot of resistance. And the community was like, whoa, 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 it looks like you're kicking a dog when it's down. Somebody who's down on their luck, and you're now treating them very poorly. They didn't offer any solutions. They just said, you can't be here. And I think if your job is to be a member of the community, if not a leader in the community as police officers, then you have to offer solutions. And you got to treat people with respect. And you have to actually care for the community as to where will these people go if we kick them all out. Should they be there? No. But it's your job as public officials to come up and devise a plan. John Tory did not lay out a clear plan, did not advocate for the people who were there, did not introduce or invite anybody from those leadership communities that can help with shelters, with temporary home situation, with social workers. I don't think this was a well-executed plan, and the proof is in the pudding. The marketplace will always tell you what's going on. Look at the response from the people who lived around the area who heard what was about to happen. Everyone came and barricaded and blocked. That tells you right there that there's a problem with the approach that you took to try to solve this problem. That's my piece.
Yeah, and Bart, I wouldn't at all disagree with you. I think the problem comes when they do come up with these plans to reallocate people that are down on their luck in the neighborhoods that they do it in, there's now uprising there. So this is the other side where you're not really going to win in this situation, because I look at like my area, for example. So there's a temporary homeless shelter just by Mount Pleasant and Roehampton. And people are up in arms about reallocating people that are down on their luck to that hotel that literally went out of business because of COVID, and the government is paying for that shelter. But people around my area are like, yeah, see, we want you to care about homeless people, but we don't want you to care about them in our neighborhood.
Facts.
So that's where like it gets really dicey, where we're like, okay, cool, like let's make change. But then as soon as that change comes to our backyard, we're like, I want to change, just not right here.
Can I just add one more thing and I'm going to be done? There are so many countries around the world that have eradicated homelessness, and it's well within our means to do so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that there's a massive problem. Like, again, we're working on a systemic issue, right? And I think that the issue isn't that these people experiencing homelessness are in parks and sleeping there and, setting up camp and shelter. The issue is what I was reading about today was that the issue is that they actually don't feel safe inside the shelters that they are given, and the resources that they're given. They actually don't feel comfortable and safe to be in there. So I did a little bit of digging around in that, and you realize that that a lot of these homeless shelters operate almost like prisons. So there's people that go there. There's like sex trafficking is rampant in these shelters. It's crazy. It's almost like a prison hierarchical system that's there, and so people they'd rather take their chances on the streets and sleeping there, where they know that when they put their head down at night, that nobody's gonna come and sexually assault them, or nobody's gonna come and beat them up or take all of their stuff. And I think that this is that like the issue is the systemic thing, right? It's like we see the police trying to get at the symptoms of a systemic thing, and of course it's how people are reacting. But again, like all these things that we talk about, it's a both and, right? Like, we do want our citizens to stand up for the people who are experiencing homelessness, who are on the fringes of society, and but at the same time, though, in as much as that, we do need people to go into these places to push for better situations, for better resources for our homeless people, for our people experiencing homelessness, to be able to come out of their situations in a sustainable manner.
I think that O'Shea's right. O'Shea's right. Sorry. People don't want people experiencing homelessness to be in their neighborhood. It's just, it comes up every time. A couple years ago, there was a gag in Leaside where they were going to put a men's shelter in Leaside, and the community was in uproar because they didn't want that there. The problem with it doesn't sound terrible, but I don't care. Trinity Bellwoods Park is not a park for people to pitch tents. It's city property. It's a park. It's meant for everybody to enjoy, not for anybody to live in. Homeowners in that area are complaining because people are peeing on their property. People are ruining property. So at what point do we say, okay, well, this is not property damage. This is like you're impacting the community around. There are temporary shelters, Adam's right, but people don't like to go to them. So what can be done? Because the city has set up shelters. There's shelters at Exhibition Place. There's shelters at the Delta Hotel on Kennedy. They're for people that can go there, who want to go there, but they don't want to. We've driven people out of neighborhoods, the Lawrence Heights area being gentrified. You talk about like Regent Park gentrified, where people live. There are a few places in the city where people want to be anymore because they've been priced out. The police are within all their right to do that because they've been asked to. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, notices were given out before. This wasn't a spur of the moment thing. This wasn't something that just popped up. John Tory didn't just walk into his office this morning and said, all right, let's evict them people out of Trinity Bellwoods. No, this was planned. It was planned in advance. And so if it's public property, it's within the jurisdiction of the city, and the city has the onus on them to, protect the public interests. It's not right, but it is what it is. That's what happens when we, this is what happens when we come together in a community. What can we do about it? I don't know, man. I have no answers on how to solve the homeless problem in Toronto, because it's a growing problem, and it's been growing for the last few years. So I don't guys. You guys know I'm out in the streets at 2 a.m. in the morning.
Working.
I'm working.
Don't say it like that. Like you're like, yo, you guys already know. I'm out here in the streets.
That sounds you're working illegal. In the streets.
And there are a lot
important to say that he's working for the TTC during that time.
Working them streets.
Absolutely specific. What he's doing when he's working.
Yeah, you just put him on blast.
Hold up. Yeah. I got flamed for that last season for putting his job on blast. And you just put it out there.
Tim just did it.
Nah, it wasn't Tim. That was Kareem.
That was Reed.
That was Kareem.
He works for the totally tubular.
We all look alike. We get it.
Yeah.
We all look alike.
So when I'm at work, I see people, they're walking these streets. So what do we do with these people? What do we do with people who are homeless, experiencing homelessness or whatever? I'm not trying to be PG or anything, just saying, like, what do we do with that? How do we do anything? How do we do something? What can we do? Because as you guys know, the city of Toronto is bursting at the seams, and land isn't cheap, and people are trying to make a profit. So where do we place people?
I got the answer, but I'm gonna let someone else speak. Go ahead, Reem. I got the
Uh,
answer.
I quickly just want to say, like, at the end of the day, I do think, like, we're talking about there's places for them to go, but I do want to echo what Hosky said, that it's a systemic issue. And so, with that being said, to speak to that, like, for me, it's more the fact that they use so much of the city's funding. Like the way they came out, there was so many people out there that were getting paid as police officers to try to deal with this situation. First off, did you really need that many police officers to do that? Could you have allocated some of those funds for those people that you were paying to be there to other things? And I know that still wouldn't be enough to eradicate the issue that is at large, but at least if they were to start thinking about solutions rather than these band-aid situations, like actual things to get to the heart of the issue, I think is what they need to start thinking about. Obviously we're dealing with the housing crisis. We're dealing with people who, for whatever reason, coming up in wherever the areas in which they've grown up, there's systemic issues within the educational system and so many other things that are leading to these people ending up where they're ending up. And so I think more than anything, the government needs to start thinking about allocating their funds to help these issues and look at some of those countries that have been able to eradicate homelessness in those countries. If those countries can do it, we can do it too. So why not use our funds in a more appropriate way to try to work towards addressing this situation? It just looks bad when you come the way that you came and you're not actually doing a lot to address the issue.
So I just want to first jump back in on something that Stefan said. He talked about how this just over the time doing what he's doing in the front lines of public work, that he had noticed that the city is bursting at the seams. The reality is the city has always been bursting at the seams. It's just that with COVID, with not as many regular people around that are taking offense to the fact that there is someone who is unhoused, someone that is homeless, someone that doesn't fit into the construct of society. They are now around, so they are moving into parks, setting up tents. They are sleeping on street corners, on vents like never before, whether it be on Bay or Queen Street, just because with less people around, ironically, it's safer. It's something that if you were to interact with anyone that does any work as an urban slash social worker within the city, they will always say that this has always been a problem. And I would say the challenge for us is there are programs there that will offer support and everything else along those lines. But a lot of the times we're trying to fit people into a system that they originally walked away from because it doesn't work for them. And so the challenge for us is figuring out, okay, what are we going to be able to do for ourselves to adjust it so that this system now works for them and not them for the system? Because really that's what we are expecting of them without saying that. And it's like Bart is always speaking truth, and this itself is not a slant. So, Bart, you're up, man.
You're muted, bro.
I think Jason's gonna go next. Jay, you go next, and I'll go after.
Yeah. I mean, I think Tim really hit some on the nail. Just the fact that, I mean, you're looking at people who tried to become a part or try to be involved in a capitalist system. And, it's interesting. I think many of us guys on this show have interacted, and some maybe have invested and really tried to help some people who were homeless, actually try to get them out of that type of lifestyle. And I think one of the challenging parts, and even that we've all kind of touched on to, the fact is that if you go to many large cities, you will see, unfortunately, many homeless people. In a city as progressive as Toronto, with us growing and busting at the seams, I mean, there's so many people. And, I mean, when we're looking at homeless, there's
situation is a one size fits all, and you have you have some people who actually there's very few, but I've talked to some, they actually like going to city, and they're like, okay, this is my lifestyle and I don't want to be a part of the main society. And then also then you have the shelters that a person can be involved in that really aren't that good at all. So I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's sad that there was that police presence, but it's almost like the old African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. But sometimes when people don't want to be a part of the village or society, it really takes other people to invest in to get these people up to a certain place or a certain position and get them back on their feet. But yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's not something easy to handle. I don't agree about how they handled it, but I think there definitely could be some better ways for us to really, allow these people to live and have some form of a better life, I guess.
Yeah, I would say two things. Number one, this is a marginalized and discriminated against group of people, the same way Indigenous Black people are discriminated against. They A lot of times communities and societies don't know what to call them, what to do with them, where to put them, how to treat them. And in this case, it's a little bit weird because it's almost like it's accepted in society to kind of ignore people who are homeless, to walk by them, to pay them no attention, to deem them as crazy or a nuisance or an attribute to the devaluation of their property. And I do genuinely think that we can eradicate homelessness, but the system is built solely for money. If you look at the places that have done so, that have eradicated homelessness, a lot of them treat housing as a right. Everyone should have the right to feel safe. Everyone should have a right to place to call home. Now, in Toronto, we live in a very hot market where the province makes a lot of money off the sales and transactions of homes. And the city and the province makes a lot of money on the sale of land. So if we would take a little bit of break on making all the copious amounts of money and maybe just build some permanent housing, not temporary stuff, that is for people permanently, saying this is your home. If we could also bite the bullet and invest into our communities now to say we're going to have more social workers, incentivize them to be in urban centers, because it's not just in the city of Toronto. There's lots of homeless people inside of Brampton and all the surrounding areas, people that are going through a real tough time. And I know Jason and I think Tim as well, there are people who are part of an alternative lifestyle who don't want to be on the grid. But I think that is far and few between from the mass majority of people who are panhandling, sleeping in the streets, tenting if they even got it, or lining up at food banks. So the issue that we have is we've prioritized money more than people, money more than communities. Because if we prioritize the communities, we would have made sure that people had a place to live. Would it be very expensive? Absolutely. Would the cost slowly go down over the course of the next 20 years as you start to eradicate the homelessness? Yes. So it's called an investment. You have to invest now before it gets out of control, because it's getting very much out of control in every urban center city that you see. There's going to be lots of people who are sleeping on the floor, who don't have a place to live, who ain't got nowhere else to be, and we could solve this.
It's possible. The problem is nobody's going to vote for the guy who says we're going to flip everything around for the benefit of our society 10, 15 years from now. We don't have politicians, and it's going to be a politician before anybody says it's why does it have to be up to politicians. We don't have people like that in our leadership civically, if that's a word. We have short-sighted politicians who are thinking, okay, what can I do in my 4 years? And anything that can happen in 4 years usually takes 8, 12, right?
I'm calling cap on that.
What are you calling cap on?
I'm calling cap in terms of that we do have people with that, but it's measuring. Okay, I'll give it. Sorry to interject, but I'll give a short story on why I'm calling cap. you guys all know Elon Musk. Elon Musk was on an interview, and he was essentially asking about, they're saying Elon, basically around the lines of, Elon, what problems would you want to solve and stuff, and could you solve? And Elon's issue was, it's not actually the resources that he had. That was the issue. It's the time he had to be able to solve the issue in which he was able to do. And so the problem is that the way that our parliamentary system is set up is the reason why. So like we also see this with like the subway systems and all that kind of stuff. The reason why these things are not issues, because some people prioritize them. They go really hard into them. They lose their next campaign, and then suddenly these things get pushed into the back burner because someone else has something else that's burning on their heart. So I just think it's not fair to say that there aren't those kinds of people in office that don't have these things on their minds as their agenda. It's not that they're disheartening about it. It's just that the time that the length of time that it takes to solve an issue like this vastly goes beyond the term of a politician.
Right.
So let's in that regard of politicians. Recently, we've been beginning to see. I'm going to make a little bit of a turn here. We can continue this conversation because I think it all ties in. We've been seeing politicians that have made some rules years ago. Suddenly now, statues of them are being torn down at an alarming rate here in Canada. We've seen that happen on the Ryerson campus downtown Toronto. And just this past weekend, due to his role in the pains that the Indigenous population has experienced, the statue of John A. Macdonald, the first Prime Minister of Canada, was torn down as well. We've seen other major names who have been a part of our history. As their history has come out, we've seen many say, we need to cancel this person. We need to no longer look at them as a reference point. We need to change our history books. We need to silence their voices. And we talked a little bit about, Stefan mentioned the idea of politicians who, it might take them this amount of time. Adam mentions that it's about the amount of time that they have to devote resources to problems. Gentlemen, when you see now statues being torn down, the idea of canceling certain people, canceling things like Canada Day, canceling things like, Father's Day, Mother's Day, all this sort of stuff. What comes in your mind? Andrew, I'm going to turn to you first because you've been quiet, sitting on the sidelines a little bit, kind of observing the boys. You know what I'm saying? Taking your foil hat, throwing it away, all that sort of stuff. So I want to go to you. I want to go to you first. If those of you who are wondering why you said that, that's a joke. That's an internal joke that came out in our earlier chat today. So Andrew, what are your thoughts on this sort of idea of kind of the quieting of some as we're learning more things about them?
You know what? I don't know. It's a hard thing because, on one hand, you have a people that have been really hurt and destroyed by these, figures. And so when you look at these figures, it is a reminder to certain people groups that you have been destroyed by them, that they've been, torn apart, that their, identity and culture have been ripped to shreds. At the same time, it is part of our history. And so how far do we go with this? Do we stop teaching about them in our schools? Because it is a part of our history. The good and the bad, we need to learn from our past and learn from the good and the bad, to be better in the future. So I don't really know. I kind of struggle with that. In terms of the Father's Day and Canada Day and all those things, I think we're going a little too far with those type of things. To cancel Father's Day, to cancel Mother's Day, I understand where people are coming from in terms of, there's some people that don't have dads, there's some people that don't have moms, things of that nature. But how far are we going to go? Are we going to start canceling everything?
Well, Andrew, to be fair, the church has been trying to cancel Halloween since the beginning of Halloween.
Yeah, and we still have Halloween. So exactly my point. So,
Hallows Eve.
So
so
now we participate. You can't beat
No.
them, join them.
Hallelujah night. It's called Hallelujah night.
Free candy.
Bart.
Yo, free candy's free candy, eh?
Right.
But I just don't know. It's like you listen to these things, and I just sometimes I gotta shake my head because I'm sorry, guys. I wish I had more. I just sit here.
We've pushed Dad too far.
So then, Calvin, what about you? Again, you're somebody who oftentimes on our show has an opposite opinion on something that Andrew would say. I think there might be, at least in this regard, there might be some similar thoughts, perhaps.
Yes and no. I think that
There you go. Sorry.
yeah,
I tried to be
you
the
tried.
branch.
I get that there's fatigue and there's a tiredness and there's this general sense of how far back do we go in human history for the apology tour, right? We're kind of stuck in the last 500 years in the context of North America. And we've heard some of the polarizing comments about that, and we're seeing what happened in the States now happening here as we start seeing the crossover there. Here's a quote from Sir John A. Macdonald in 1885. We've been pampering and coaxing the Indians that we must take a new course. We must vindicate the position of the white man. We must teach the Indians what law is. We must not pauperize them, as they say we have been doing. He was completely okay with getting rid of a people group that stood in the way of his hopeful future for something called Canada.
And their culture and identity. Yeah.
We have to acknowledge the ill that this man also brought. So, okay, great. We got a country and a flag, and we get to be benefactors of what he trailblazed. But we have to be honest about what he stole. We have to be honest about the ill effects of his life, his choices, and he was a product of his era. We get it. Again, colonialism goes far beyond what England has done in the world. It goes back and back and back to countries that are still having some of these issues on the continents that we come from. I think that it's important to change the conversation. I think it's important that kids today, like my niece is learning, that Sir John A. did some things and he did some other things. That he isn't only to be praised. He isn't only to be celebrated. Here is the whole context of what needs to be happening. And maybe that means no statue. Maybe that means no school named after you. Maybe that means no road or parkway that bears your name. But we still need to have the conversation about you. You can't be completely canceled. And we talked about this in the Dr. Seuss things. This stuff needs to be left in museums and in history books, taught wholly. And that's my thought.
Yeah.
So if I could just jump in real quick.
Go ahead, Bart.
I would just add and say, I think the schools, roadways, and statues, it is harder, right? It's people just get weird about stuff like that when you start changing the names and stuff like that. I think we put so much effort on the statue and we don't put enough effort on what Calvin just said. Is we need to make sure they know the real story. Let the statue be there, but let everyone who walks by it know, that man, he did a lot of things, XYZ, and he also did a lot of things, XYZ. And then we can say the whole thing. Because I think that's the biggest issue. People think that by removing these symbols, that it will change the narrative, but we have it backwards. We have to change the narrative and provide the context. And so the symbols make sense.
So before Tim jumps in here, a lot of people now, they like this whole thing, right? Like we walked through it from last year. Defund the police, defund the government, tear down statues. It's pretty well been like this era of rebellion coming from a good place. Like these things have not worked, so we need to change the entire thing. Just to kind of capture what you're thinking, Bart, instead of kind of tearing these things down, we need to kind of like reframe how we even use them to begin with. Is that sort of what you're saying? Bart is not even responding to me.
Bart, can you hear?
Can you hear me?
I can't hear. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, I couldn't hear you, fam.
I was basically saying, like, we had episodes last season last year in May, June. We talked about like defunding the police. Now we're talking about like now we're seeing people tear down statues, all this sort of stuff. What I'm hearing you say is maybe it's not just kind of like just erase these things, but reframe these things.
One last time, please. I missed it again.
I'm not even gonna say it again. Tim,
Yo,
go ahead.
Bart, how's your Wi-Fi, fam?
No, all right.
I'll put it in the chat for you, Tim. Go ahead.
Tim, just read.
So let me then respond to this. In the area of statues, I am more of the ilk of keeping them there. It's one of those things I am reminded. My mind comes to the picture of the statue of Egerton Ryerson at Ryerson University, and the statue itself is covered in red paint. And it's one of those things that I feel that if they left the statue there and it isn't cleaned up, that would beg more questions as to what happened there. Why is it like that? And there's a history that is to be told. It is something that then engages and catches the eye of the passerby, because the reality is, it's like I've walked Ryerson campus with friends. If I was going somewhere after work and I had to go through, it's like, ask me where that statue is or where it was, and I can't tell you, because it was done in such a way that it's like we're almost numb to the statue itself. But when we see something that is a spectacle or has been defamed, it stops us and asks the question, why is that the case? And it's something that I know, just going back into the chat, and I know we see you, we read the comments. Just going to go through a couple from previous conversation. Maddie Colburn, when we are talking about the issue of homelessness, agreed, this is awful, but simple solutions don't exist. There are root issues that need to be targeted. Temporary housing is usually unsafe and very abusive. We can't simply throw money at the issue. And then Hannah Chamis, also because there are places for people experiencing homelessness to go, doesn't mean that that's where they want to go. Rape, discrimination, sexual harassment, and issues in shelters. And Rachel Baker says churches can't take people in. There are so many other things you need to think about with that. They aren't a housing facility. And then Zach Baker in flight goes not exclusively in response to Calvin and Marco, but they can offer small solutions to some immediate problems. Hey, city, we'll let you set up a restroom on our property if you help us maintain it. It's a true story. And I was also looking through the comments. I saw David Burke, buddy from Bible College. He had said that among everything else in relation to this conversation that we're having, is that there is an upswell in relation to changing the name of Ryerson University itself. But yeah.
So then I guess the question I have is, a lot of this is connected to the idea of canceling. And that's something that we've talked about this before in our own group chat. We've talked about this before in previous episodes, in part, not the whole. But a lot of the statue stuff is connected to a cancel stuff. And somehow this idea that if you cancel someone or cancel something, then it ceases to exist, that it no longer has power. When in actuality, the moment you cancel someone or something, it actually gains more power and more attention than it did before. O'Shea, you're the youngest out of all of us. You represent a demographic that those of us on the show we can only dream of one of being in.
I'm still your generation, you bum.
Also, for speaking of generations, shouts to Aaliyah Joy Watson in the building right now. The little queen them.
You're she's making noise. Say hi to
First
the
guest on the show, bro.
Say hi to the
so
massive.
adorable. There you go. That's the younger generation. She's already stealing the host job. That sort of thing is awesome. She looks like she's finna sleep though. She looks she's fighting sleep hard.
She is fighting sleep. I don't know why she's out here trying to make an appearance on the show.
Yo, Stefan, just for YouTube, can you consent to your child being?
Fair enough. That's a good question. That's a good question.
I do give consent.
That's an awesome question.
I do give consent. My daughter is with me.
There you go. I don't want to get sued.
But if you use her image and likeness, send them royalty checks my way, family.
So O'Shea, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what are your thoughts on this idea of like tearing these things down, of canceling these? I'll use the term Canadian hero because that's what we've known of them literally up till last year, right? Like, so what are your thoughts on that? Like, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think it just goes down to, and I think Bart touched on this, man. And Tim a little bit. It's about teaching. I don't think canceling is the appropriate measure because we also like, and I feel like I might just be echoing things to be completely honest, but like a lot of these quote unquote heroes that we're looking at canceling have done some really good things. If we look at the grand scheme of things, yeah, they have some things that may have tainted their legacy in a way, but they still have done some really good things. And if we're gonna look at biblical perspective, I look at someone, and you guys might get a good chuckle out of this, but I look at someone like David, where like he's done, and like
Chandler Moore, you mean?
No,
Honor David, not me.
I mean the OG David, the OG.
Okay. Sorry. I thought you meant the modern day.
The shopping cart guy.
I thought you meant Dave Chappelle.
I thought you meant Twerk Special.
We moved on from that. But when we look at David, he's done some great things, and he is, when we look at our Bible, a role model of how we should actually worship God and enter into that presence of God. But we also understand that he's done some really bad things, but we teach according to that. We say, man, David has excelled in these areas, but in this area he actually hasn't, and we teach on that and we educate on that. And I think that's probably the best way that we can go about it. It definitely will take a lot of work. It'll take rewriting our whole history books, but if we're willing to make that change, I think the impact will be great, and I think the impact will be lasting, where now you'll have a generation like Stefan's lovely daughter who will come up understanding, okay, cool, people can do great things and still do horrible things at the same time, and we can be okay with that, because I feel like we're in a place where we're not okay with that, and that people either have to be good or they have to be bad. There's no in between, or we can't celebrate the wins that people have, and we can't learn from the losses that people have unfortunately done.
I like this. I like Hannah's comment in the chat. I fear with cancel culture, we will erase things so deeply that they will inevitably repeat themselves because the lesson is not there to learn from it. If that makes sense. And that's where my thought is. Like, please don't get me wrong. O'Shea just said it perfectly. Like, good people do bad things, bad people do good things. It's in our nature as humans to do both. And, do they deserve statues? I don't know, man. Like, we're talking about the founder of a university. We're talking about the first prime minister of the country. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. You can be the judge. But I think the problem is that we think that, okay, or not we, but a lot of people in this social movement, this social, social justice warriors, these people who say, listen, we're going to do this thing, and that is the thing that solves this issue. And I think the problem is that we forget that we are very privileged. We live in 2021 where we have the ability to look back throughout history and say, you know what, that was racist, that was wrong, that was wrong. We got to correct these things. Um, but we look to correct without learning from. We look to correct and cancel without
Yeah.
taking the lessons and applying
Mm.
them. And so that's one of my biggest problems with cancel culture is that we just cancel. We don't learn, right? It's the same thing like when we talked about Dr. Seuss a few months ago and these books that they got rid of. Um, I'm totally okay with that, but you know, I don't think that you destroy every single copy. I think that what people need to understand is that the next generation, my daughter, I want her to read that book and then I want to have a conversation with her about it and hear her thoughts and let us have a dialogue because that's how we learn. That's how we pass down tradition. That's how it's through conversation. And we don't have conversation anymore in our in not a generation, but in our society today. We tweet, we join a hashtag, we feel good about ourselves. And like I said before, it's on to the next thing. We don't stop and pause and have those conversations because people aren't mature enough or people just don't have the temperature to sit and listen to someone else's perspective without giving their own thoughts. And I
Well,
think that's a part
yeah.
of a huge problem.
I would only, I see that like, Calvin, who is Nivlak Sebrov in our group chat right now. I don't know why, but to your point, Stefan, I don't know if we really. I think it goes back to that Elon Musk idea of like it's not about having the resources, but Adam said it's about having the time, and we don't have the necessary. We have not given ourselves the time to actually really learn about things. We move quickly from
Too
one thing
quick.
to the next.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times you've put in our chat where you talk about. Remember, it was a year ago that we all did Black Scores Black Lives Matter, and then we moved on to the next thing, and then
Right.
we moved on to this issue and that issue and this issue and that issue, and we've literally forgotten about what we've canceled before we kind of just move to the next thing. Calvin, do you want to read what you put in the chat there before if we're gonna talk all brazen
Oh, yeah, I wasn't going to say anything wild.
or Nivlak, sorry.
Yes, Nivlak Sebrov. Zach Baker said to the cancel culture not being too far. I don't know. Give me a real example of cancel culture going too far and then us not being able to learn from the lesson. And then he said, it sounds like rhetoric more than a fact. So I can't think of one, but what would you guys lob up to say, hey, here's a moment where we canceled, and by that we didn't learn the lesson that the whole world needed to be shocked by.
The first thing that comes to my mind is, and this is something that like Bart mentioned, what's his name, the guy
Aziz
from
Ansari.
Aziz Ansari.
Yeah. Yeah.
Aziz
So
Ansari,
here's what I would say to that, and I know I've spoken a lot today, so I'm going to keep it brief one more time. We spoke in the summertime. I forget what the topic was about how the more conservative people, conservative leaning people. I'm not saying extreme or far. I'm saying leaning people are always going to try to hold the line to resist the advancement of what they would call propaganda, government is my business, and crazy liberals. And liberal leaning people are always trying to push the boundary further and further to where they believe the line should be. So there is always going to be this tension. Should there be unisex bathrooms or not? Should there be Father's Day or not? And I don't think this is a political issue by any means, but I do feel like we have this tension that is always polarizing. And I think sometimes I have to agree with Andrew, we've gone a little too far. I don't know what the lesson is for canceling Father's Day. Whether you identify as a man or a woman, there has to be a mother and a father who birthed a child. Now, whether you are absent or present, whether you consider yourself male or female, it doesn't matter. biology says a male and a female create a child. So the celebration of to what we're celebrating is the one for the mothers, one for the fathers, to celebrate the raising of children and to honor them. There's nothing to be canceled. There's nothing to say that, well, by saying that you celebrate one, you degrade the other. So I just want to keep it funky 100. I don't care whether you identify as somebody who's transgendered or queer, whether you're a mother, whether you're a father, whether you're single, you're married, or common law. These things are just facts. And if it offends you, you have to always keep in mind when you are offended about something, it's because it touched a nerve in you. That does not mean it touches the nerve for the populace at large.
Have we? I feel like we've.
Hi,
people are-
Aaliyah.
Oh, she's back.
Hi, Aaliyah.
I feel like people get offended at not at well, yeah, you're right, everything, but if you don't agree with someone, they're offended.
Mhm.
And I
But-
honestly, what like, Bart, I don't know where we draw the line. I don't understand how we. I honestly don't even know how we got here. You know, we don't rehab people anymore. We don't. We just say, "Oh, you don't agree with us. Goodbye." Right? Like, I don't think that's right. Like, I think.
Sorry,
I-
no, go ahead, go ahead. Now,
Okay.
before Tim jumps in, I want to pass somebody. 1 second. Go on there, Simon.
So real quickly, I think now this might people might come at me if you will, but I think the girl in the bird watching case, right? Remember we talked about last
Amy
year,
Cooper.
Amy Cooper, right? I understand what she did was wrong, right? But the level to which social media and everybody got to where people were like finding out all of her life's information and stuff like that and not giving her a chance to rehab herself and things of that nature. I think we go to the extreme because of social media. I think that we don't forgive and grow anymore, learn. We don't do that. We just say, oh well, you're the bad finger, so we're just going to cut you off, right? Like I don't know.
Yeah, but there's a level of that. As I fix my camera, like Hitler, and we've posed this many times.
You went from Amy Cooper to Hitler?
Yeah, but like you're saying we need to rehab people. There just is a legitimate reason for certain people to be canceled. Yes or
Okay.
no?
So-
Yes or no?
You went from
Okay,
Amy
but hold
Cooper
on.
to
Yes or no?
Hitler.
You're
Yes
right.
or
You're
no?
right. You're right. Right.
Hitler.
You're right.
That's
Yes or no?
extreme.
But
That was that was a like. There's probably a lot of
Yes.
jumps before
But that's what I'm
Hitler.
saying is like, and I kind of threw it in the YouTube chat. There's a difference between not liking somebody or not liking what someone did, which is what you're saying, Stefan. And I agree 100%. That's not worth canceling. We're too quick to pull the trigger on people. But then there are people who have made like legitimate crimes against humanity that this is not up for debate. So we have to have a better grid.
That's why we have
I
jail.
agree. Yeah. Canceled. Like canceled. Nobody's saying that we should put a Hitler statue up anywhere. Nobody's saying, hey, yo, you know what? Right beside the World Trade Center, because people need to know the story, Osama bin Laden statue. Why wouldn't we do that?
Well, we wouldn't, but maybe people in different parts of the world might.
Right, but what we're
Jason,
saying
wait,
is we have the ability
I
where
want to
we
go
are,
Jason. Yeah.
where we are, we have the ability to say, we actually aren't going to celebrate that. And so we're going to pour paint on it and tear it down.
Do you not remember 9/11 when people were in the streets shouting "Death to America," buddy? Where people were,
Oh, bless you.
Tell him again, little one. Tell him
where
again.
people
She
were
amen you
cheering
with
The
his
light
voice.
skin coalition is speaking to you, sir.
No, she sneezed all up in your face, bro. That's
The
a good-
delegation.
that's
it
your-
Right.
was his dry heave reaction.
Yo, his glasses are wet.
Oh man,
That was amazing.
you guys don't like people were
He cleaned his
celebrating what was
glasses.
happening on 9/11.
Yes, but
right? We live in a
but
different.
we wouldn't
we
put a
wouldn't do
statue
that
up. Why? Why wouldn't we put a statue up?
because we were afraid for our lives.
No, that's not the reason. It's because
No,
we're
the
not
reason-
going to celebrate the
Well, we're not
pain
gonna
that was
celebrate it.
inflicted by
No.
the person that would be erected. It's just not. It's not what we do, and we have to have that agency. We have to have the ability to. Again, it's not to be revisionist, but we have to have the ability to go back and say, yeah, we're actually just not going to celebrate this anymore. It wasn't as good as they said it was. We have to have that agency.
And I disagree with you. I think
You're
the problem is we don't know, and this is where it goes to what Bart and Bart and Stefan were saying is we don't know now. We've lost the plot in terms of where we figured that part out, Calvin. That's the problem. We don't know because now we have now made everything Hitler to that end of the spectrum. We've made everything from the person who has a bad day in a grocery store and yells at a cashier to the mass murder. We've made them all that bad
Well, I
on
think
an instant.
I think that's because
All
we like a
villains.
lot of very conservative Christian preachers, right? And so just in terms of our foundation, no, think
What?
about it. In
What?
terms of our thoughts on sin through the conservative voice in North America, that's an easy reach. That's a dumb reach to reach to say everybody's broken and off, and so everybody should be treated wrong. You just have to look at certain denominations in the States that we don't align with, but you can see that kind of narrative and that kind of behavior is executed every single day.
Yo, O'Shea, translate for him. What did Cal? I don't know, man.
No. I before we do that, like Jason and Andrew both did this at the exact same time. But we
Well, no, because I just
I don't get it either.
Most of
I
the
don't think he's wrong. I just don't
Doctrine
think
of
he's
sin.
explaining
What are you
himself
talking
right.
about?
What?
No, I mean,
But how do you get there?
okay, no, Jason, jump in there, Jason.
yeah,
No,
Just
I'm-
before you do that,
yeah.
we're going a little extra for time. We're all tired mans, but we started a little bit later, so we're gonna give you a little bit more, and then we're gonna. Tim has been begging me for a question so he can close off the chat. So prepare yourself for that. Tim's gonna close off our time before we have a couple of announcements. I sound like we are in youth group and it's a Friday night. Regardless of that, Jason, talk to the man, Deb.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of see what Calvin's saying, but but when it comes down to it, I think that it's not necessarily even that whole conservative part of doctrine and teaching, because we do forgive people, but also at the same token, like if something's wrong, it's wrong, but you know, it's both ways. I kind of don't agree with the whole doctrine teaching thing, but that's another story.
But Jason, what I'm saying
Go ahead.
is that in the church,
Right.
we
go ahead.
believe that whether you stole a chocolate bar from the convenience store or you led a genocide, that is the same thing in the eyes of God. That's a general Christian teaching, yes or no?
Yeah, for
So then
sin is sin, but
yeah, so
then
then that's what I'm saying
the
is like
effect, right? The effect
what I'm
is
saying
different.
is like the idea that you offended me, you're canceled, or you led a genocide, you're canceled. That is in the same scope and is being led by the same people who think the same way, right? We talk about all this and we don't agree with this, but like, oh, we're Christian nations. So the values and the morals in the book that foundational people in our nations have set up as this is who we are and this is what we stand on, it's not hard to realize why the clapback would be, well, if we're all broken and we're all depraved and we're all far away, then nobody makes it. And so I don't like the way you looked at me. You don't make it either. It's a spiteful response. I'm not saying that it's a legitimate like way to go about things. I'm just assessing that there's a closer parallel than we're willing to admit right now.
Andrew, you have a stank face.
no.
I'm
I'm trying to figure out my wording. That's why, because I
okay,
don't.
because
I
either
don't-
you have a thought or you just heard somebody playing your own song, "I See the Lord," which you can find on Spotify and Apple Music, and you're like, yo, the bass line for that song is
Stop
sick.
it.
Better than Fred Hammond.
I don't know if I'm just trying to understand. You're saying that the reason why people now are hard or judgmental on others and willing to cancel them is because the church has seen sin as sin.
I'm saying that the church has had this very practice for things that they don't like or that they don't agree with, and that it's embedded in the culture more than we like to admit. Yes.
Okay. Because if anything, people are more attacking the church than anything else. I
Oh,
don't
yeah,
know
it's a
with the
clapback.
same. I don't know if it's with the same remedy.
It's a
because
clapback. Yeah.
They're trying to say, okay, you guys are bad or whatever the case might be, but we are getting a little. I don't know if we need to cancel everybody or even. And you went all the way to Hitler, But even on a even in our regular day, like there was a news report the other day about a teacher who asked the question, was there anything good that came out of residential schools? And that's a tough question. She said, was there any pros or cons? And she's getting torn apart on social media.
Because I mean, it is a great thought exercise, maybe not a very public.
Not a public, but she did it with her grade 10 class.
Yeah, like
and so now she's getting ripped to shreds about it.
And
it's like, how far do we go? Did she maybe she could have worded it better, or maybe she could have not said it at all? But does she need to be torn apart?
Right, and that's where I would say 100% with you and Stefan that's an unreasonable frustration that the general public has right now, right? Because a teacher needs to help students have critical thought, right? And you have to be able to take a look at moments in history and say, was it good, was it bad, and why? And we just don't have enough people who have comprehension. And I think that's one of our bigger problems.
But we also have people that just want to hear one side.
Yeah,
they don't want to struggle with what we're dealing with and have critical thought. And because we don't want that critical thought, one person gets lambasted if they try to deviate and say, okay, let's think about things a little bit more widely.
Yeah, and that's where I'd say the grid has to be established, because that should not be canceled. And general public and all of us should be defending those educational spaces where critical thought is necessary. But then there is that guy is an offense to humanity, whether it was 1 million people or whether it was 4,000 people, right? And we just don't need to celebrate it.
But those people who try to have that conversation, they're given labels, and they're excommunicated, they're canceled. So and if you defend them, you're excommunicated, and
because you're seen as something.
Wait, does Candace Owen count?
In some respects,
we we won't let Candace. Won't let, because we don't put controls on no woman. That's not how we operate.
And apparently we found that in our chat as well, in our comments as well, ladies and gentlemen.
We don't like some of the
y'all
things
flame me for that.
We don't like some of the things Candace Owen says, but I mean, she's allowed to have her own conversation. She's allowed to speak her mind. But
just like your daughter,
my daughter.
Shout out.
I think that a part of the problem is that we're with a generation of people who were brought up not to have those conversations, and we're seeing the repercussions of that. I think I'm done. I'm yielding my time.
That's fair.
And listen, again, we're having a conversation. If you're still rocking with us, we're going to be ending in a couple minutes, but we're just having a conversation here. I think it's valuable for us to recognize that, Calvin, you said that a grid needs to be made. The problem is neither side wants to concede a part of the grid being made by the other side. And so, we talked about this earlier today. We had a conversation about vaccines earlier among us. And the conversation came up about one side says this and the other side says that. And because no side is agreeing with anybody, it's really hard for us to kind of figure out okay, so what is the truth here? Because everyone's saying a whole different thing, right? So the idea of a grid works if everyone's willing to say, we agree that this is the grid. But when this side of the world says this is what the grid is, and if you don't agree with that part of the grid, then you're canceled. And whether that's with regards to marriage, gender, finance, status, race, and then the other side says the exact same thing based on the exact same thing. It says the opposite based on the exact same thing. It makes it so much harder to kind of decide, well, who is canceled, who isn't, what do we learn from that sort of thing? Yeah. And then we either overreact on some things and then we underreact on some things that we think we actually probably should have been reacting on. It's a whole mess of it. It's a whole mess.
Well, and that's why, and so when I say grid, I'm not saying that we need to go into politics and try and figure out this or that. It's just, even in our conversation, some of us said John A. MacDonald should be remembered. His name should still be on the buildings, and we should learn from the lesson of a statue. And then I'm saying let's remove both. And then there's other people who aren't a part of this chat that are we're going to paint it red and tear it down ourselves, because we're not going to allow this to be in a forum of debate. We're just going to take our
Matters
future
into our
in
own hands.
control. So, yeah, I'd say just we want a revolution. It rarely happens in the House of Common. But here on the House of Common show,
revolution.
you can spark it. You know what I'm saying?
Do you want a revolution? Oh, look at Calvin quoting gospel music.
I was not quoting gospel music.
You were.
Sorry,
That's how
Calvin. I had to jump in.
That was O'Shea. That was O'Shea.
Come on.
I was
All right, so
more,
Tim,
Che
Tim,
Guevara.
you've been asking to ask this question for a long period of time.
I hate you.
So what is your question, my friend, or what is your comment that might end with a question?
So, from listening to this conversation, from society's reaction within the city of Toronto to the realities of homelessness and having to come face to face with it, and then also the removal of statues and the eraser of names of individuals that we are currently grappling with because of their past sins that we either didn't know about or didn't pay much attention to. The real question is all of this, whether it's how we handle homelessness or how we invoke cancel culture itself, is it really just not censorship? It's our way of grappling with something that we really don't want to interact with. It's easier for us to remove something and not have to look upon it versus having to go through the pains of watching it. It's like my eyes can't handle it. My life can't handle it. My children can't handle it. Is it really not that we're just censoring the world that we live in and what we take in? That itself is it. Is this not just censorship?
So here's my thought on that. Maybe we, unless the world goes to hell in a handbasket next week, maybe we carry on this conversation next week on our season finale episode. We are taking a summer hiatus, a summer break. The Mans have put in work legitimately since October, I believe, of last year. We have, outside of a couple of times, no, we literally, outside maybe Christmas time, we have not missed an episode as a collective. We have put in work. To this day, neither Bart nor Andrew have actually missed an episode in 2 freaking seasons.
We need a break before we get canceled.
But not canceled like we said
Or
something wrong, but
censored.
more like canceled, like, like the network decided that they wanted to go to different directions. So
Yeah.
next week next week is our final show for this season. We're going to be coming back in the fall after next week. We are going to make sure to put in some things here and there. We have some small little projects that we're working on to make sure that we have stuff going on throughout the summertime. But next week, make sure to join us for our season finale. Can you believe we're going to be ending season 2 and we're going to be walking into season number 3? We be scheming on the streets.
Stay scheming.
You already know what it is. You already know what it is. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chris Chase here with Nivlak Serbrov, Andy Jones, Reem, O'Shea, Tim, Jason, Adam, Bart, Aaliyah Watson, the most important of the Watsons, Aaliyah Watson. This has been the House of Common Show. Find us on Apple Podcasts. Find us on Spotify. Find us on YouTube. Subscribe to everywhere that you can find us. Find us on social media. Instagram, House of Common Show. Facebook, House of Common Show. Twitter, House of Com 1. Numeral 1. We will see you next week for our season finale. Good night, friends of the house. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.